Shabbat Shalom.
So, growing up, I went to a Jewish summer camp, and it was a really formative and important experience for me in a lot of different ways. And during camp, and this may resonate with some of you, whenever there was a special day, if it was Maccabia, if it was another special day, if it was somebody's birthday, they would always start out by saying, "Today is an extra, extra, extra special day." And so when I was getting ready to tell you guys about what I was going to talk about tonight, I had this deja vu feeling where, again, I would stand up here before you and I would say, today is an extra, extra, extra special day, because I feel like we just did that. We had Purim, it was an extra special day. We're going to have Passover in a little bit, also an extra special day. It's Shabbat every Friday and Saturday. They're extra special days. I'm here to tell you, today is also an extra, extra, extra special day. Thank you, Cantor.
I've been to Jewish summer camp.
That's right. It is kind of a ubiquitous thing. I don't know why, but there you go. So we have all of these things that are coming up, and today, this extra special day is called Shabbat HaChodesh. So in the weeks prior to Passover, there are what are called Arba Parshiot. There are 4 Torah portions that lead up to the Passover experience, and they precede Purim and Passover. This week is the 4th of these 4 Parshiot, and they have to do with the extra section at the end of a Parsha called Maftir. And so we add these extra portions, and they specifically relate to the themes of Purim and of Passover. So the first one is Shabbat Shekalim. Shekalim is a kind of money, and it talks about the census that is taxed on every Israelite male, that is to say. And what it does is it doesn't actually have a specific significance to Purim or Passover, but it's kind of like tax season. You know that when that hits, something else is coming up. So Shabbat Shekalim reminds you that your money is due to the temple, and the temple is going to be very important because that is where you sacrifice and make the Passover offering. So you have about a month until that happens. Better pay your taxes. Then we have Shabbat Zachor. Shabbat Zachor is the Shabbat of remembrance, and it happens right before Purim, and it talks about remembering Amalek, which we do by telling the story of Haman. Boo. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Boo. So we tell the story of Haman. We fulfill the commandment to blot out the name of Amalek. Then we have Shabbat Parah, which tells the story of the red heifer. Now, the red heifer is this mystical, mythological animal where you find an unblemished red heifer and you sacrifice it, and its ashes can be used to purify people. And now it's very important to become purified before Passover because you can't partake in pilgrimage and Passover sacrifice and get close to the temple if you yourself are not in a state of being that would allow you to get close. So we read Shabbat Parah. Next week is Shabbat Hagadol, which is the Shabbat that is right before Passover, the grand one, the big one. Yes, I see you looking, Sally. It is the Shabbat before Passover. It's very hard to believe, I know. So we have Shabbat Hagadol next week. This week is Shabbat HaChodesh. Shabbat HaChodesh is the Shabbat where we celebrate Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And in Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the month of Passover, right? So it is talked about as one of the beginnings of our new years. And so we celebrate the beginning of the new month, Shabbat HaChodesh, and we have a special Torah portion that talks about getting ready for Passover and all of the things that come of Passover. So all of this is to say that we are getting in to the Passover spirit. I know it doesn't seem like it's time, believe me. But take this as your reminder that it's time to buy your matzah and your manischewitz. Go for it. We need to get ready because it's coming. I know. There's never a dull moment, is there? So as I was preparing for this Shabbat and thinking about Shabbat HaChodesh, I started thinking about all of the different ways and lessons that we learn as we prepare for telling the story of the Exodus. And the story of the Exodus from Egypt is not just a few moments in time. It is actually a pivotal and core part of our identity and our symbolic significance in our own lives, because we tell the story about what it is like to be enslaved for 400 years, and then we cry out in pain And with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, God rescues us and hears our cry and brings us out of slavery. But it's really not that easy. We know that it takes a generation of people to understand what it means to go into freedom and to be a free people. And so the story is a really significant part of who we are because we remember that we were once strangers in the land of Egypt, and therefore we know what it means to be a vulnerable community. We know what it means to be in pain and to feel outside. And we have an obligation to help those populations. And so I was thinking about, how we talk about Passover and how we tell this story and how we emotionally and spiritually prepare to relive that experience, because that's what Passover is. It is our opportunity to tell the story, and we as if ourselves are slaves in the land of Egypt, and in every generation we move from slavery into freedom. We have to make that journey so that we can tell the story as if we lived it. On Shabbat services, we often, and really on our daily services, we sing Micha Mocha. Micha Mocha comes from the Song of the Sea. It is from the words that were sung after Miriam crossed the sea and all the Israelites go onto dry land. And they get this miracle of life again. They go into freedom and they are stunned by what is happening to them. And there is joy and there is ecstasy that they made it out of slavery. There's this miracle that happened, the waters part, and they walk across the land, feeling that it might not be real. The waters are about to crash on above them, and yet they make it out onto dry land. And so they're standing there after they've crossed, and they're singing, and they're dancing, and there's joy, and there's ecstasy. And so the Midrash tells us, though, that the angels are looking down with God over the celebrations, and they're saying, look at this joy, look at this elation. We want to partake in that. Can we partake? And God says to them, how could you possibly celebrate? How can you rejoice in this moment? The Egyptians are still my people, and those people are drowning. Those people are suffering. You cannot rejoice in somebody's suffering. It teaches us that regardless of what we are feeling in the moment, we cannot rejoice in somebody else's suffering. We have to see the humanity in each and every person in our lives, in the world around us, in our communities. And so I'm reminded of this midrash and all of these conflating pieces in my life as we're approaching Passover, as we're in Shabbat HaChodesh, as we have celebrated Purim and triumphed over evil, and yet we are in this war with this devastating loss to humanity, coupled with a really tragic disaster this week when 7 aid workers from the World Central Kitchen were killed in air raid strikes. And it is complex, and it is emotional, and it is painful, and it is traumatic. And regardless of where we sit or stand in our political lives and in our relationships with Israel and with Palestine, we also have to see the humanity in every single person. We have to be reminded of this pivotal moment, this pivotal text, where we are hearing God say, you cannot rejoice when people are suffering. So in every moment of our lives, and as we approach these moments, whether they're Shabbat and we're still singing joyfully because we have to have that moment, and we have to have that opportunity every week to set aside the schmutz in our life, we also have to carry with us, there is pain, there is tragedy, there is suffering in the world. And in order to live up to our truest values and be the best kind of people that we can be and the greatest kind of community that we can be, we also have to acknowledge and see the suffering of our fellow human beings. So as we go into Shabbat, as we inch closer to Passover, as we move forward into reliving this experience of moving from slavery into freedom, I hope that it is with our understanding of our own redemption and our own freedom that we can continue to learn and grow and find the humanity in every single person. Shabbat Shalom.